Commencing countdown.
3, 2, 1.
This is the Contracting Experience, connecting government contracting professionals to the world around them through conversations with acquisition influencers, insights into evolving hot topics, and sharing lessons learned from the field.
This episode of the podcast is with Head of Air Force Contracting, Major General Alice Trevino, and podcast guest interviewer and future Contracting Squadron Commander, Maj Delaney Kiernan. General Trevino talks about looking at the challenges and opportunities in Air Force contracting through a lens of alignment, prioritization, and simplification. She also addresses how lines of effort are being reviewed and addressed within the Air Force contracting flight plan. General Trevino encourages contracting professionals to think about their growth and how setting goals can help them stay focused on their personal and professional development.
All right, ma'am, you took over as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Contracting for the Air Force just this past summer. What has that transition been like for you?
So Maj Delaney Kiernan, thank you for asking me that question. I'm very happy to be here, and I really appreciate you setting up this podcast.
Of course.
Today.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm also very excited because you have been selected for command. So I just wanted to congratulate you publicly here.
Thank you.
On here as you guys go off next summer. So, you know, moving is, I think it's never easy. But the new job, the new position, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Contracting, it's everything that I thought it would be and more. And the coolest thing about going to the Pentagon, of course, I've been assigned there 4 times, so it felt like returning home. My last position I left in 2018, working for Secretary Mattis and Secretary Shanahan, was in a different part of the Pentagon. So the new was like getting lost and trying to find myself, and you know, this was a different corridor and in a different hallway. So that was a little bit unexpected, just trying to find my way to work and coming back into the battle rhythm of what we had. But what was wonderful was returning. It just felt like returning to family, but leaving one family at AFICC and then knowing so many people on the SAF-AQC staff. So that was really helpful. Didn't feel like I was outside of my comfort zone, but I just felt like, you know, every time I wake up in the morning and I go into work, you oftentimes you don't know what email you're going to get, which I would say is probably the same for you and the same for all of us. So just having a wonderful staff and knowing the points of contact from the other staffs and learning about, you know, our colleagues in SAF-AQ, and then of course being able to reach out to our senior contracting officials across the Department of the Air Force. That's one of the great things that came out of COVID, is because we know how to use Teams now, and we know how, you know, we're not as unfamiliar with reaching out in virtual ways. So I would say joining the SAF-AQC staff was everything that I thought it would be, and about 1,000 times more.
So in that same vein of 1,000 times more, what would you say has surprised you the most?
What has surprised me the most? So, gosh, you know, maybe the intensity of the asks, because we are, you know, when we're going across 26 portfolios with our senior contracting officials, I have been for the last 4 years at AFICC, you know, focused on operational acquisition, and now, you know, as a change agent, I have to put my money where my mouth is, and I can't be stuck in the past. And so I need to not just understand the operational acquisition portfolio, I need to understand the systems portfolio, I need to understand classified. And so really getting to know each of the senior contracting officials' portfolios separately and their uniqueness I think that has surprised me the most, but it's also been the most exciting. So I'm one of those people who I think that challenges are opportunities. And so every challenge has been a great opportunity for learning and a great opportunity to meet somebody new, really expand my comfort zone, and kind of get to know the building a little bit more down hallways that I had never been down before.
Fifth time's the charm then.
Fifth
right?
time's the
There it
charm.
is. So pivoting to your messaging to the contracting workforce from your new position, your communication is based on looking at everything through the lens of alignment, prioritization, and simplification. Can you talk about each of those areas a little bit? Maybe give some examples?
Yes, I can. So, when I got up to the position in July, it had been over a year since the Secretary of the Air Force had introduced his operational imperatives. And in September, at Air Force Association, the Airspace and Cyberspace Symposium, he, Secretary Kendall, talked about, hey, I released these a year ago and we're still on this path. And what was interesting to me about the number one, which is alignment, is you have to understand where your senior leaders are going. And if you don't understand where your senior leaders are going, very difficult to follow them, but also to even understand the why, and to get into step behind them. And so that became, as I came into the new position, the number one priority or focus area that we wanted to go is to making sure that we were aligned so that all the senior contracting officials knew where we were going. And we are expanding it to that as we go into 2023, but it's really about all 8,000 of our contracting professionals. We have 700 officers, we have 1,400 enlisted members, and we have over 6,000 civilians. So if all 8,000 of us do not know where we are going, it is going to be very hard and very inefficient to be rowing in the right direction, to be moving in the right direction, again, to even know what direction we're supposed to be going in. And we have to factor in the Secretary of the Air Force operational imperatives. We need to understand, it's a space order of battle. We need to understand command, control, communication, and battle management. We need to understand next generation air dominance and all the family of systems and sensors. And the easiest way to know that all 7 operational imperatives are interlinked and they affect each other. But after NGAD, with as we go to a 6th generation fighter and combative collaborative aircraft, when that stands up, that is evolving the way that we fight. And, some people don't know what C3BM is. Some people don't understand the air battle management because maybe they haven't been on those. But it's really to make sure that the sensors that provide data give the shooters the data that they need at the time and the perfect timing precisely when they need it. And that's for decision making, that's for commanders on the ground. And so, I went through the 3 OIs, and then as we get into resilient basing, we get into global strike and systems, and then of course that we get into readiness. The having and understanding where all of those OIs are going and how we fit in, and making sure that we're not trying to compartmentalize, but we're seeing them as a whole and a holistic approach to that. That, along as we feed the National Defense Strategy, and then everything for AQ, SAF AQ, my boss, Honorable Hunter, where his AQ focus areas are, and then the majority of our teams, the predominance of our 8,000 folks are within Air Force Material Command. And so we need to understand where General Richardson is going. And then with our Space Force counterparts, we need to understand where Honorable Cavelli is going. So those are the driving principles behind why alignment is so important. And then with prioritization, which is the second lens that we look through, if we are doing so much because everything's important, then we're probably not we're probably not focused on the most important, and that's where the prioritization piece comes in. So as we brought in our senior contracting officials this July and August, and then we had our board of directors meeting in November, we looked at the 2022 flight plan, and we looked at everything through what should we be doing, what are we not doing, and what should we continue to do. And then we had a great conversation with all of our LOE champions, and to make sure that we were focused on our priorities, and we had tough conversations on trade-offs that had to be made, and we're taking those into our flight plan for 2023. That also, when we're focusing on our lines of effort, so we still have 4 lines of effort, and so we have our mission-focused business leaders, we have our tools, not rules, we have innovating business operations, and then we have our expeditionary contracting operations as our contingency contracting officers support the joint force and the expeditionary workforce. But all 4 of those, we now have 31 key results, and we have down selected by using that rubric on what was achievable, what was resourced, where did we do a feasibility analysis, and we were able to truly prioritize. And at the same time, we were actually able to give back white space for some folks who were working on some of those key results that maybe weren't going to get across the finish line without this, that, or the other. And so those were great conversations that we had with our senior contracting officials. And I'm really excited, and looking forward to, I'm excited about 2023 as we release our flight plan in February. And that last component of the lens that we look through is simplification. And I'll just go back to, there's 8,000 of us, and we have to speak to every single member. And if we're not speaking to every single member, the junior members in addition to our senior members, then we could be leaving people behind, and we can't afford to do that. It literally is unaffordable, and it's a waste of our resources to do that. So we have to be focused on where we're moving and going forward. So alignment, prioritization, and simplification. It's 3 components of that lens that we're looking at all perspectives and making sure that we're getting feedback from folks. And as we go into 2023, I'm really excited. And one of the other things that we're going to do, and I don't know when this podcast will be released, but we are going to fight for feedback. So when we send out drafts of the flight plan, we want people to read it. We want to make sure that we've met the mark. And the simplification piece will be one that is truly critical, because if it's not simple and it doesn't make sense, it will be hard to execute. So we want that feedback before we actually snap the 1 February target. And if it takes a little bit longer to get that feedback, we're willing to take some time there, because we don't want to force something. We don't want to be schedule driven. We want to be more event driven. And the event is that we get feedback and make sure that we're resonating with everybody across the enterprise, and that we're listening to what people are saying. So
it's not a one-timer. It's a revisited.
It's a revisited. Sometimes I call it a living document.
There you go. Yep.
And then so you'll be able to see our the flight plan as it comes out. You'll be able to see the overarching lines of effort. You'll be able to see the objectives, and then the key results, which change a little bit more often between 31 and 34 key results that we have. We'll have the links on our Air Force Contracting Center so that you can go to AFCC, the SharePoint, and see where we're at on those. Most importantly, if you are interested in a key result that just really is something that is near and dear to your heart, that you can volunteer, and so you'll know who the leads are, and so you can raise your hand and ask to be part of that group, working through your supervisors and your senior contracting officials, because that's what it's about, right? It's still one of my favorite quotes is alone we can go fast, but together we can go far. And the only way to go far with this flight plan and to achieve everything that we want to is together and collaboratively.
Awesome. Circling back to the board of directors, so I know you discussed that y'all talked about the flight plan there, but what were some other challenges discussed or areas of opportunity that were highlighted while you all had that meeting?
So, like I said, we met in July, August, and November, and there was a lot of discussion. And I think that one of the hardest things. So, there's a great book out there by Adam Grant. It's called Think Again, and he loves to talk about. He has a couple chapters, and he actually weaves it in and out of his stories on escalation of commitment. And escalation of commitment is when you're unwilling to change your mind. Sometimes you can even be overly concerned with the sunk cost, which is I have spent so much time or so much money on this already that you are unwilling to walk away. And I would say that there were some key results that some folks, by virtue of just their participation in it, were very emotionally attached to some things. And by the fact that we looked at all of them through this alignment, prioritization, and simplification lens, we were able to make it a little bit less emotional. And so there was a lot of data-driven conversations, but also, you can't ever really take out the emotion component altogether. We're humans. We are not robots, thankfully, because I think we're pretty awesome as not being robots, and we'd like to keep it that way. But, understanding that there are, key results that people, they had invested a lot of time in. And so those are the conversations where we spent a little bit more time and really had to be, honest with ourselves of, well, what were the constraints? What were the obstacles? Why was it so hard to get those over the finish line in 2022 or maybe even earlier? And then, the operational imperatives, they had only come out in 2021, which was the fall of 21. So if your boss is telling you that these are the important things and those are what are going to get resourced, that really helps you. It helps you make some decisions. It helps you make some trade-offs. It helps you make some tough decisions. And then there are a couple things that maybe you want to extend out, and maybe you're unwilling to totally walk away. And some of those things that we know that we really want to achieve, but there's a lot of ingredients, I would say, that we still need before we can make that souffle. We have put them in the parking lot or sandbox, and we're hopeful that we can get more data on them, seek more resources, seek the advocacy from other stakeholders within, not just across the department, but maybe in the building. Some of them, have fiscal constraints, and so by putting them in the sandbox until they get to a decision point where maybe they needed money, then we'll buy ourselves some time. And then at the end of 2023, we will go through that analysis again, and then we'll make a decision on whether or not that will stay in the flight plan for 2024. So everything in the flight plan today and everything that the senior contracting officials discussed and the LOE champions discussed, every single SCO raised their hand and voted. And if there were opposing views, we heard them out, and we are being very ambitious in some areas, but we're also very realistic, which goes back to that feasibility analysis, that some things are going to take longer than a year. And it kind of goes back to that old adage where you can keep kicking the decision down the road and then you'll never start. But what you're doing is you're leaving it for the people behind you. And I would say the most emotional that I get, and I will always get, is when I'm making a decision today in 2022 or 2023 that I know is going to impact our workforce in 2030 or even 2035. And so if it's the right thing to do, we have to find a way. We will break down walls. We will knock on doors, and we will find the advocates, because we need that advocacy within the building and across the department. for contracting. But as we enable program managers and the multifunctional team everywhere we're at, I mean, our mission partners, we have to do a lot of things collaboratively with them. And so sometimes we have to slow down a little bit to bring them with us, especially when we have the great ideas. And, there was a great article I read a couple of years ago was about, like, how do you know when you resonate? How do you know? And sometimes life is about timing. And so we're leaving some opportunity out there where we have some decision space. And then when the time comes where we're going to have to, potentially make a tough call and say, this is no longer viable, we're not going to get there, we'll make those, but we're going to make them together as a team. So I'm pretty excited about that. And so I guess I would say, not a whole lot of it was very constructive. There wasn't, and there was a lot of debate, but that's the dialogue that we need and the feedback that we seek. So it was a great board of directors meeting.
So, in your opinion, what should the everyday Air Force contracting professional focus on in completing their day-to-day jobs, and what should that individual keep their eye on from a strategic standpoint?
Day-to-day versus strategic. Yes. I will say that there's no perfect balance, and that's a great question, but it's also a very difficult answer because I believe in the uniqueness for each individual. I love the fact that we have individual development plans because they're individual to the person being developed. And that has to be an IDP conversation between the employee and the supervisor. I also encourage all employees to have mentors, and they can be informal and formal mentors, and they really should be, even across from different functions. But day to day, as you're thinking through how do I want to grow, I would offer one way, and there's no perfect way, but one way is what goals do you have? If I'm a brand new employee and I've been in the office for 3 months or less, I mean, my goal is probably to be able to find my lunch, understand what my telework schedule is, meet the members of my team, and those are some short-term goals. If I've been in Air Force contracting in the Air Force for 29 years, I'll pass 30 years next June, and it's amazing how fast the time has gone. But what I always found was really helpful was kind of setting out those goals. And so I would offer that, again, one approach is kind of setting out your both professional and personal goals, and then a short-term, mid-term, and long-term for each. So really it's 6 goals, and they can be interwoven. But, if I've been in the office for 3 months and you ask me for a short-term goal, my definition of short-term might be a week. If I've been in the office or the organization for 10 years, 15 years, my definition of a short-term goal might be 1 to 2 years. And then a medium goal might be 2 to 5. And then, frankly, this is kind of funny because I feel like yesterday I was a second lieutenant, and if you asked me what the definition of long-term was, at that time I would have said 5 years. But now to me, long-term is 20 years. And so what are my professional and personal goals in 20 years? I know that at that time I will no longer be in uniform, and so you have to have goals because I am committed to lifelong learning. I am not one of those people who shies away from not knowing something. A voracious reader and learner, and I just ask a lot of questions, and I learn from everybody around me, officer, enlisted, civilian, and I would offer that's one way that you could kind of think through your own goals. And Delaney, as you go to command, I know that first of all, we'll have a squadron commander course next year, and you'll be invited to that. But when I'll give you a little peek underneath the table, but when I talk to new squadron commanders, I say that if you think you have this, and you're not a little anxious, then there might be something off a little bit, because it should be anxious causing. It's not anxiety. We don't want you stressed out, but you are going to be responsible for people other than yourself for really one of the first times. And it's exciting, but it's challenging, and it's a little anxious, anxiety causing, all the above. So, exactly.
So what do you hope to see accomplished, to keep with the theme of the time of year? What is on your Christmas wish list for 2023 in Air Force contract?
Yes. My holiday wish list. My holiday wish list. Well, yes, the holidays, as we go in, I mean, I already said it's not schedule driven. We're going to be event driven with the flight plan, but I'm so excited. So Mr. Scott Callisti, he's my deputy, and he is our integrator for the flight plan. And he and Brian Lark and Will Winnig and all the SCOs and the champions, I mean, they are moving mountains by putting words and metrics behind each of the key results. Because if you have a key result, which is feeding an objective, which is going after that larger line of effort, if you don't measure yourself, how do you know what success is? And my holiday wish list is that we have some very meaningful metrics, so that we're able to measure ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to where we're going. And then, as I kind of spoke earlier, that we leave ourselves some decision space where once we start collecting data, we may be off a little bit, and then we can course correct. But I'm really excited as we go into 2023. And I know that Miss Nancy Andrews, she interviewed me for her quarterly newsletter, and she asked me, you know, what I thought was one of the biggest opportunities that we have that we can work on. She actually labeled it a challenge. Again, I don't see challenges, I always see opportunities. At least in the long run, right? In the not at the onset. At the onset, we might be shocked into not even moving. But once we get through that and learn a lot more by asking questions and bringing together the team, I would see our biggest opportunity is collaboration. And collaboration does not mean consensus. It means that you come to the table prepared. It means that you come to the table with ideas. It means that you are able to bounce your ideas off of others, and that everybody has an open mind. And that in this way, I see collaboration as a huge opportunity for 2023, as we bring together collectively across the enterprise all of our mission-focused business leaders, which I see as you cannot be a mission-focused business leader unless you are a change agent, because you physically can't grow or expand or learn without changing. And those are intertwined to me. But to make stronger mission-focused business leaders, we have to change. We change within ourselves. And as we go into 2023, I want us to change how we see collaboration. So looking at networks in a different way, who do we need to bring in with us? Who do we need to partner with? Partnering more and stronger with defense industry, partnering more with small businesses, with Ability One, with commercial industry, who have dual use technology that we can bring to bear on those operational imperatives that Secretary Kendall has laid in front of us, and that we do everything that we can to accelerate change so that we win.
Awesome. Lastly, as is usually appropriate at the end of a podcast, do you have any plugs for any other books, podcasts, things you're listening to, things you want to share with folks?
Okay. Well, so I still love Think Again, and I would say if you haven't read it or downloaded the podcast, that is a great one. I still love this podcast, which, Amber created, and I'm very grateful to be on this podcast again.
And it turns 4.
It turns
week.
4.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's awesome. And I've been listening to a couple new ones, Gen Z, which is good because I actually have an executive coach, and I know Amber was talking to, we were talking about the difference between mentoring and coaching. And my executive coach, he always asks me questions about, yesterday was 2 days ago, we had a conversation about, well, what do you see in your ballpark? What's going on in your neck of the woods? And he's working a different project, but he asked me about my thoughts on why some people aren't open for feedback. And I said, well, I think that some senior members in the Department of the Defense, everywhere, I could say corporate industry, everywhere, there's generational differences, and instead of embracing those general differences and trying to find out what makes people different, that's one thing that makes people uncomfortable. And my husband, Ray, he often tells me, he's like, I could never go back and serve again because I would be so upset with people asking me why do this, why do that. And I'm glad, I'm happy, I'm thrilled. I didn't get that gene. I'm the opposite. I want to know what makes people tick. I don't think that just because someone was born in a certain year that they're going to act a certain way. I think everybody's different and unique, and really challenge myself to learn about different generations and not assume that just because, oh, you were born in 1984, you're a blank, that you're going to behave a certain way at work. I want to know the kind of generic overall behavior from a generation, but I also want to know what's important. So I really like this Gen Z podcast, and I think it was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. They had shared it earlier on one of the specific ones that they wanted us to listen to, and I just kind of download a couple of them because they're kind of fascinating. It's either on trends and shopping and fashion, and then also work behavior. So I'm always learning in that. So I would look for a Gen Z podcast, and then my favorite, my fourth favorite would be Something You Should Know by Mike Carruthers. So that's a good one. I listened to one today, and it wasn't that good, but it was still eye-opening and gave me some food for thought. So.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this, ma'am. It's been a pleasure. Welcome back to Right Pat.
Thank you.
Temporarily. And happy holidays to you and yours.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
If you have suggestions for topics or people to interview or feedback on the podcast, you can submit those at thecontractingexperience@gmail.com. I want to thank you all for listening to the Contracting Experience podcast. Until next time, keep connecting to the world around you.